Imagine walking into your dream car showroom, only to be laughed at, insulted, and thrown out just because of how you look. That's exactly what happened to a young black girl named Maya. But what the arrogant salesman didn't know was that Maya wasn't just any ordinary teenager. The very next day, the ground shook as her billionaire father's Rolls-Royce pulled up to the dealership. And what happened next left everyone speechless. Get out. You don't belong here. Those 6 words struck like thunder. The voice was cold, sharp, and filled with arrogance. The entire luxury car dealership went quiet, the air heavy with awkward silence. In the center of the polished showroom floor stood Maya, a young black girl no older than 16. Her hand froze midair, where only moments before she had been pointing at a gleaming red sports car under the spotlight. Her eyes, full of curiosity and admiration, suddenly dropped to the floor. She could feel dozens of eyes piercing her, staring at her like she had trespassed into forbidden territory. The dealership was like a palace of cars, gleaming vehicles lined up like jewels, glass walls reflecting the bright lights, and a faint smell of leather and fresh polish floating in the air. Salesmen in sharp suits strutted around like peacocks, ready to greet customers who looked rich enough to spend. And in the middle of it all was Maya, wearing nothing more than her school uniform and a backpack slung loosely over her shoulders. She hadn't come to cause trouble. She hadn't come to buy, either. She had simply walked in because she loved cars more than anything. Ever since she was little, Maya had been fascinated by engines, colors, and designs. Her walls at home were covered with posters of Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and, yes, even Rolls-Royces. For her, cars weren't just machines, they were dreams on wheels. But the manager of the dealership didn't see a dreamer. He only saw someone he judged as poor, out of place, and unworthy. "Did you hear me?" His voice grew louder, echoing against the glass walls. "You don't belong here. This isn't a playground. Go home." The words cut deeper than a knife. Maya swallowed hard, her throat dry. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack. She wanted to say something, to explain, to defend herself, but her lips refused to move. Around her, the silence broke into whispers. "Why is she here?" someone muttered. "She probably just wanted to take pictures." Another customer chuckled. "Kids these days," a woman sighed, shaking her head. Each whisper felt like a slap. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to vanish, to disappear before her tears betrayed her, but her feet wouldn't move. She stared at the shiny white tiles under her shoes, wishing they could open and swallow her whole. The manager stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. His suit was expensive, his tie perfectly knotted, but his eyes were sharp with disdain. He leaned slightly toward her and hissed, "People like you waste our time. Customers here have money. Do you?" The question was cruel. It wasn't really a question at all. It was an insult dressed as one. Maya bit her lip, so hard it almost bled. She wanted to scream, "You don't know me. You don't know my life." But the word stuck in her throat. Slowly, she nodded. "I'll leave." Her voice was barely above a whisper. And just like that, the tension broke, but not in her favor. A few customers smirked, amused by the scene. Others simply turned away, pretending it hadn't happened. Not one person stood up for her. Not one person said, "Let her be." Maya turned and began walking toward the glass doors. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her reflection stared back at her from the cars she passed, big, glossy machines that she had dreamed of touching, maybe even driving someday. Now they seemed to mock her, as if the cars themselves were saying, "You don't belong here either." When she reached the exit, she paused for just a second. She looked back at the showroom, the rows of shining cars, the bright lights, the people who judged her. She wanted to remember this moment, not to cry over it, but to make a silent promise. "One day I'll come back, and when I do, you'll see who I really am." With that thought, Maya pushed open the door. The cool air outside brushed against her tear-stained cheeks. She stepped into the street, her heart heavy but burning with something new, something stronger than humiliation. But in that moment, all she felt was pain. She walked down the sidewalk slowly, replaying the cruel words in her head. "You don't belong here." It was as if the phrase had been branded onto her soul. She thought about how excited she had been only an hour ago. After finishing her classes, she had taken the long way home just to pass by the dealership. From the outside, she had always admired the place, pressing her face against the glass to look at the cars inside. Today, she had finally gathered the courage to step in, to see the cars up close, to feel what it was like to stand in her dream. But instead of inspiration, she got humiliation. Her tears blurred the busy street ahead of her. She pulled the hood of her jacket over her head, hoping no one would notice her crying. The city moved on around her. Cars honked, people rushed, neon lights flickered. But inside, Maya felt frozen in that single cruel moment. She reached a park bench a few blocks away and sat down. She dropped her backpack beside her and buried her face in her hands. The tears came faster now, unstoppable. She felt small, invisible, like she didn't matter. For a long time, she just sat there, letting the emotion spill out. She thought about all the times people had underestimated her, at school, in shops, even in her own neighborhood. But this was different. This wasn't just being ignored. This was being told, you don't belong. The weight of those words crushed her, but somewhere beneath that weight, a fire sparked. She didn't know it yet, but this moment of humiliation will be the start of something far greater. Because Maya wasn't just any ordinary girl, and the man who kicked her out of the dealership had no idea whose daughter he had just insulted. The dealership scandal slowly began to fade from the headlines, but the lessons it sparked remain alive in countless conversations across homes, schools, and workplaces. For weeks, people debated what had happened. Some shared their own painful experiences of being judged unfairly. Others celebrated how Maya and her father turned an ugly moment into a powerful teaching for the world. As for Maya, life didn't simply go back to normal. It transformed. She wasn't just a girl who got kicked out of a showroom anymore. She had become a symbol. Teachers asked her to speak at school assemblies. Journalists wanted to interview her. Community leaders invited her to events where respect, diversity, and equality were the topics of the day. At first, Maya was nervous. Standing on stage in front of a microphone made her palms sweaty. But every time she thought about that humiliating day, the laughter, the sneers, the pain, she remembered that there were countless others who felt the same way. And if she could use her voice to make them feel stronger, then it was worth every moment of stage fright. One evening, a few weeks after the Rolls-Royce incident, Maya sat with her father on their balcony. The city lights twinkled below, and the gentle hum of life filled the night air. "Daddy," she asked softly, "do you think people can really change? Or do they just say they'll change to look good?" Robert leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "That's a good question, Maya. Real change isn't proven in words. It's proven in actions. I don't know if Mr. Collins will truly change. But I know this. You already have. You grew stronger, wiser, braver because of what happened. And sometimes that's enough." Maya smiled faintly, her heart lighter. Months later, she found herself walking past the same dealership again. Curiosity tugged at her, so she stepped inside. This time, nobody stopped her at the door. The new staff greeted her warmly. "Good afternoon, welcome. Can we help you look at something?" Maya looked around. The atmosphere was different, less cold, more human. She noticed a young boy in sneakers and a hoodie standing near a car. Instead of ignoring him, the staff member was cheerfully explaining the details of the vehicle, treating him with the same respect as any wealthy customer. And for the first time, Maya believed maybe her father was right. Maybe people could change. She smiled to herself, turned around, and walked back out into the sunlight. But the story didn't end at that dealership. 1 year later, Maya launched a youth program with her father's support. The mission was simple: to help young people believe in their worth, no matter what anyone else said. They called it the Respect Project. Through workshops, mentorship, and community events, Maya shared her story. She told kids, never let anyone tell you that you don't belong. You belong wherever you decide to stand. Respect is not something you earn by money or status. It's something you deserve simply by being human. The Respect Project grew beyond what Maya could have imagined. What started as one teenager's humiliation turned into a movement that inspired thousands. And that, my friends, is the story of Maya, the girl who was kicked out of dealership, only to return the next day in her billionaire father's Rolls-Royce. But remember, this isn't just about luxury cars or wealth. This is about something far greater: respect. Every single one of us deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter what we look like, where we come from, or how much money we have. Arrogance might win in the short term, but in the end, respect always wins. So the next time you see someone being underestimated, remember Maya's story. Because sometimes the people the world looks down on are the very people destined to rise the highest. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that will inspire and move you. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and remember, respect is priceless. The dealership that once carried itself with so much arrogance now stood under a cloud of shame. The sleek glass windows that once reflected power and prestige now looked like mirrors of guilt. Business had dried up. Customers canceled orders. Staff members were quitting. And the once proud manager who mocked Maya couldn't sleep at night. His phone was full of angry messages. Online reviews poured in like a storm, dragging the dealership's reputation into the ground. The clip of Robert Williams stepping out of his Rolls-Royce Phantom had been replayed across every social media platform, every news channel, every talk show. The manager, Mr. Collins, knew he had made the mistake of his life. For years, he had looked down on people he judged as unworthy of stepping into the luxury showroom. He believed appearances defined value. But now, his arrogance had destroyed everything he worked for. And so, swallowing his pride, he requested a meeting with Robert Williams and his daughter. When the request first came in, Maya was shocked. She sat at the breakfast table, reading the formal email aloud to her father. "Dear Mr. Williams, we wish to sincerely apologize for the unacceptable treatment of your daughter. We would be honored if you and Miss Maya would allow us to meet in person to express our regret. We hope for a chance to make amends. Respectfully, Richard Collins, General Manager." Maya looked up at her father. "Daddy, after everything, you're not really going to meet him, are you?" Robert leaned back in his chair, calm as always. "Sometimes, Maya, the hardest thing isn't punishing someone. It's listening to them. We'll go." Maya's jaw tightened. The memory of being laughed at still burned. But why should we give him that chance? Robert reached over and placed his hand gently on hers. Because forgiveness doesn't excuse their behavior. Forgiveness frees you from carrying the weight of it. The next day, they arrive at the dealership. This time, the Rolls-Royce Phantom didn't come quietly. Cameras flashed, journalists swarmed, and curious onlookers crowded outside. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Staff members stood nervously, their polished smiles gone, replaced with uncertainty and shame. Mr. Collins, the same man who had mocked Maya, now approached with trembling hands. His once confident stride was gone. Instead, he moved cautiously, like a man facing judgment. "And Mr. Williams," he stammered, his voice shaking. "Miss Maya, thank you for agreeing to come." Robert gave him a polite nod, but said nothing. The silence itself was more powerful than words. Mr. Collins swallowed hard and continued. I was wrong. Terribly wrong. The way I treated you, Maya, was unforgivable. I judged you based on nothing but appearance, and it cost me dearly. I humiliated you, and for that, I am deeply sorry." Maya stood quietly beside her father, arms crossed. She looked directly at the man who had once sneered at her and felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, but also something else. Colin's voice cracked as he went on. "This dealership, everything I built, it's collapsing because of my arrogance. But what I regret most isn't the loss of business. It's the pain I caused you. If there's anything I can do to make it right, I'll do it." The silence stretched. Cameras outside pressed against the glass. Try to capture every second of this tense moment. Employees watched from the corners of the showroom, waiting to see what would happen. Finally, Robert stepped forward. His voice was calm, steady, and commanding. "Mr. Collins," he said, "I don't care about your business losses. I don't care about your reputation. What matters here is the lesson you, and everyone watching, must learn." He placed his hand gently on Maya's shoulder. "The worth of a person is not measured by what they wear, or what car they drive, or how much money they have. The worth of a person is in their dignity, their heart, their character. And the way you treated my daughter stripped her that dignity. Collins bowed his head, tears forming in his eyes. Robert continued, You asked what you can do to make it right. Here's the answer. Change. Not just for us, but for every person who walks through those doors. Whether they come in wearing a suit or a school uniform, whether they drive up in a Bentley or walk in from the street. Treat them with respect. Maya finally spoke. Her voice was soft but firm. You made me feel small. But I realized something. I'm not small. No one is. Everyone deserves respect. If you truly mean your apology, prove it by treating people better. Not just the rich, but everyone. Her words, spoken with youthful honesty, carried more weight than the polished speeches of adults. For the first time, Mr. Collins didn't just see Robert Williams' daughter. He saw a young woman with wisdom far beyond her years. I promise, Collins said quietly. I'll do better. I'll change. Robert studied him for a long moment, then gave a single nod. We'll hold you to that. When Robert and Maya stepped back outside, the crowd of reporters erupted with questions. Microphones extended toward them. Flashes lit up the sky. Mr. Williams. Do you forgive him? Maya, what did he say to you inside? Is the dealership closing down? Robert raised a hand, and the crowd fell silent. His voice rang out strong and clear. Forgiveness doesn't erase mistakes. It demands change. We've accepted an apology, but only time will prove if it's real. Remember this, all of you, wealth fades, titles fade, but respect, that is a legacy that lasts. The crowd broke into applause. Cameras captured the moment. Maya, standing tall beside her father, no longer felt like the timid girl who was laughed at. She felt like someone who had taken back her power. And deep down, she knew the story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed. The next morning, Maya woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. At first, she thought it was just her friends messaging her, but when she picked it up, her notifications were flooding faster than she could process. Her social media apps were blowing up, hundreds of comments, shares, and tags. Confused, she opened one of the trending videos. Her heart nearly stopped. It was her. Well, not just her, but the entire confrontation from the dealership. Someone had recorded everything on their phone. The moment her father's Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up, the stunned faces of the staff, and Robert Williams' booming words. Never make my daughter feel small. The clip had been uploaded only hours earlier, and already it had millions of views. People all over the internet were talking about it. On Twitter, hashtags like hashtag respect everyone, hashtag billionaire's daughter, and hashtag car dealership fail were trending. One tweet read, Imagine kicking out a customer only to find out her dad is one of the most powerful men in the city. Lesson, never judge people by how they look. On TikTok, people were making reaction videos, reenacting the scene, or putting inspirational music behind Robert's speech. One popular creator captioned it, This is how a father should protect his child. Goosebumps. Even on LinkedIn, business professionals were writing posts about leadership and respect. A CEO shared the video with the caption, True power doesn't need shouting. It's in the calm authority of a man defending what matters. Respect must be the foundation of every business. Maya scrolled in awe, her hands trembling slightly. The humiliation she had felt just yesterday was now transformed into something else entirely. A symbol, a story that people everywhere were connecting with. Meanwhile, at the dealership, things had spiraled out of control. The manager, once smug and untouchable, now sat in his office with his head in his hands. News outlets were calling nonstop. Reporters were at the front entrance, and angry emails were piling up in his inbox. Customers who had deposits on cars demanded refunds. One wealthy client even posted online, If they can treat a billionaire's daughter with disrespect, imagine how they treat the rest of us. Never again. Within just 24 hours, the dealership's reputation had collapsed. Employees whispered nervously, some fearing they would lose their jobs. The arrogant laughter that once echoed through the showroom had been replaced with silence and shame. But for Maya, The impact went far beyond the downfall of one dealership. Her school friends began messaging her. "Girl, you're all over TikTok. Maya, you're famous." At first, Maya didn't know how to feel. She had never wanted attention. The whole thing had started with her just wanting to look at cars. But now, her experience had become a story that strangers everywhere were learning from. That evening, she sat on the balcony of their penthouse with her father, watching the sunset. The city skyline glowed with golden light, the air filled with a faint hum of traffic far below. "Daddy," she said softly, "did you know it would blow up like this?" Robert smiled faintly, swirling the glass of sparkling water in his hand. No one ever knows what the world will notice. But people are hungry for stories that remind them of dignity, of justice, of respect. Your pain became their lesson. Maya thought about that. She wasn't just a girl who had been kicked out anymore. She was a girl whose story had opened a conversation across the world. Her father turned toward her, his voice firm but gentle. "Remember, Maya, this fame is what defines you. It's fleeting. What matters is the values behind it. If people see you as a symbol, use that to do good. Use it to remind them that kindness and humility are worth more than money." Maya nodded slowly, feeling both overwhelmed and inspired. She realized her father wasn't just powerful because of his wealth. He was powerful because of his wisdom, his values. The next day, news reporters camped outside their building, eager to get a statement. Maya avoided them, shy and nervous, but Robert addressed the cameras briefly. His words once again spread like wildfire. "This is not about wealth. This is about respect. The way you treat a person who walks in with nothing should be the same as how you treat someone with everything. That is the true test of character." Those words became another viral clip, quoted on morning shows, written in newspapers, even used in classrooms as discussion topics. Students debated it in schools. Workers shared it during lunch breaks. Business leaders reflected on it in meetings. A simple act of arrogance from one dealership had turned into a global reminder of humanity. That night, Maya sat by herself, scrolling through messages from strangers. Some were heartfelt. "Thank you for sharing your story. My daughter went through something similar, and seeing your courage gave her strength. I've been judged my whole life because of my background. Watching your story gave me hope." Reading them, Maya's eyes filled with tears. She realized something profound. Her humiliation had not been in vain. Out of her pain had come healing for others. Out of her shame had come inspiration. For the first time, she didn't feel like the girl who was laughed at. She felt like someone with a voice, someone with a story that mattered. The glass doors slid shut with a quiet hiss, but inside the dealership, it was as if an earthquake had just shaken the entire building. For a moment, no one spoke. Salesmen who had once strutted around with flashy smiles now stood frozen, staring at the spot where Robert Williams and Maya had just walked out. The gleam of luxury cars under the bright lights suddenly seemed dull, overshadowed by the weight of what had just happened. The manager's face was ashen. He had been humiliated, not by shouting, not by threats, but by something far more powerful, dignity and truth. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. He was a man who had prided himself on controlling every conversation, every sale, every customer interaction. Yet in one morning, he had lost control completely. A younger salesman whispered under his breath. That was Robert Williams, the billionaire investor, the man who owns half the companies downtown. Another staff member added, "I've seen him in magazines. He's practically untouchable, and we just disrespected his daughter." The murmurs spread like wildfire. Customers, some of whom had witnessed everything, shook their heads in disbelief. One older gentleman walked up to the manager, his voice cold. "I came here today planning to buy a car, but after seeing how you treated that girl yesterday and how you handled yourself today, I think I'll take my business elsewhere." And with that, he turned on his heel and left. His footsteps echoed like a verdict, sealing the dealership's shame. More customers followed, quietly slipping out, their confidence in the dealership shattered. It wasn't just about one mistake. It was about the values, or rather the lack of them, that had been exposed. The manager clenched his fists, his jaw tight. He knew this wasn't just a bad day. It was the beginning of a downfall. Word would spread. In the world of luxury, reputation was everything. And once lost, it was almost impossible to regain. Meanwhile, outside, the morning sunlight bathed the Rolls-Royce Phantom in a golden glow. The chauffeur opened the rear door, and Maya slid inside, her father following right after. As the door shut with a soft thunk, the world outside seemed to fade. Inside, the car was a cocoon of silence and elegance. The thick leather seats, the faint scent of luxury, the gentle hum of the engine. Maya let out a long breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her father glanced at her, his stern features softening into a proud smile. "You handled yourself well in there," Robert said. Maya shook her head slightly. "I didn't even say much, Daddy. You did everything." Robert chuckled. "Sometimes you don't need to say much. Your silence, your presence, that spoke louder than anything. Yesterday, they tried to make you feel powerless. Today, you showed them that your worth doesn't come from their approval. That's a lesson most people take years to learn." Maya leaned back against the seat, her mind replaying everything. The jeers, the laughter, the way she had been pushed out yesterday. It all felt like a distant memory now, overshadowed by the proud look in her father's eyes and the shocked silence of the staff when they realized who she truly was. But deep down, Maya realized something important. This wasn't just about proving she had a billionaire father. It wasn't about revenge or luxury cars. It was about dignity, about knowing her worth regardless of what anyone thought. "Daddy," she said softly, "do you think they'll change? The people in there?" Robert looked out the tinted window, watching the dealership shrink in the distance. "Maybe, maybe not. Some people only learn when their pockets hurt. Others never learn at all. But what matters is that you learn something." Maya tilted her head, curious. "What's that?" "That respect isn't given by titles or money," Robert said. "Respect is earned by how you treat people, especially those who can do nothing for you. Never forget that." His words sank deep into her heart. The Phantom glided smoothly through the streets, drawing curious stares from passers-by. But inside the car, Maya wasn't thinking about the stares or even the humiliation of yesterday. She was thinking about her future, how she wanted to carry herself, how she wanted to treat people, and how she wanted to make her own mark on the world. As the car slowed at a red light, Maya glanced out the window. Across the street, she saw a girl about her age walking in worn-out sneakers, holding her little brother's hand. They both looked tired but determined. Maya smiled softly. She understood now. Respecting others wasn't about status. It was about humanity. Her father noticed her gaze and nodded knowingly. "See? The world is full of people who are overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. Don't ever become like the ones who pushed you out yesterday." Maya smiled, feeling a new sense of strength blooming inside her. Back at the dealership, chaos had erupted. Phone calls buzzed, customers canceled orders, and whispers spread across the city faster than wildfire. In the age of smartphones, a few had even recorded the confrontation. Clips began circulating online, Robert's powerful words echoing across social media, while the dealership's reputation crumbled in real time. "Never make my daughter feel small." That single line from Robert Williams became a viral quote, shared thousands of times. The dealership that had once prided itself on exclusivity was now trending for all the wrong reasons. And yet, as the world debated and discussed, Maya wasn't glued to a screen. She was sitting quietly beside her father, the city rushing past their window, her heart lighter than it had been in days. For the first time, she didn't feel like just the daughter of a billionaire. She felt like someone who had faced disrespect, endured it, and come out stronger. And that strength, that quiet dignity, was something no dealership, no manager, and no insult could ever take away. The heavy glass doors of the dealership slid open with a soft whoosh. The polished tile floor gleamed under bright lights, but nothing in the room could shine brighter than the aura that Robert Williams carried with him as he entered, his daughter by his side. Every head turned. Conversation stopped. Salesmen froze mid-step, their fake smiles evaporating as they realized who had just walked in. The same manager who had laughed at Maya the day before now stood rooted to the ground, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly open. He tried to gather himself, straightening his jacket and pasting on a nervous grin, but his trembling hands betrayed him. Maya walked a step ahead of her father, her chin lifted proudly. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence alone was louder than any insult the manager had thrown at her yesterday. Robert's calm but commanding voice broke the silence. "Good morning," he said, his deep tone echoing through the showroom. It wasn't just a greeting, it was a statement of power. Everyone knew this was no ordinary customer. The manager finally snapped out his daze and rushed forward, forcing an oily smile onto his face. "Mr. Williams, welcome to our dealership. What an unexpected honor." Robert didn't return the smile. His eyes were sharp, steady, and unamused. He looked directly at the manager, and in that moment, it felt as though the weight of 1,000 judgments was pressing down on him. "My daughter was here yesterday," Robert said evenly. "She tells me she was treated poorly." The words hung in the air like a blade. The other salesmen glanced at each other nervously, shifting uncomfortably. They all remembered what had happened. Some had even laughed along with the manager. Now, not one of them dared to meet Robert's eyes. The manager stammered, "Oh, sir, it must have been a misunderstanding. Kids wander in here sometimes, and—" Robert raised a hand, silencing him instantly. The gesture wasn't loud, but it carried more authority than any shout. "There was no misunderstanding," Robert said firmly. "She was humiliated. She was insulted, and she was thrown out of your dealership because you decided she wasn't worth your time." The crowd of customers and employees shifted, whispering among themselves. The air grew thick with tension. Everyone could feel the storm brewing, and all eyes darted between the billionaire and the trembling manager. Maya stood tall beside her father, her expression calm. She didn't need to say a thing. Her father's words were her shield, his presence her justice. The manager licked his lips nervously, trying to recover. "Mr. Williams, please, I assure you, we value every customer here. If there was any offense caused, I deeply apologize. It wasn't intentional." Robert stepped closer, his towering presence making the man shrink back. He didn't raise his voice, but his words carried the weight of thunder. "You see, that's the problem. You didn't think she was a customer. You looked at her, judged her, and decided she didn't belong here. You made her feel small. And let me tell you something. No one makes my daughter feel small." The room was silent, save for the sound of hearts pounding. Even the ticking of the showroom's wall clock seemed deafening in the pause that followed. Robert then glanced around at the staff, his gaze sharp enough to cut steel. A dealership like this doesn't survive on cars alone. It survives on reputation, on respect. But when respect is absent, no amount of polish can cover the rot underneath. The manager's smile was gone now. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead. He knew this wasn't just about a single insult. It was about his entire career, his entire future. Desperately, he tried to regain control. "Mr. Williams, please allow us the chance to make this right. Any car, any model, will give you and your daughter the best deal imaginable. Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Lamborghini, you name it. Just say the word." But Robert's expression didn't soften. Instead, he turned to Maya. "Sweetheart, what do you think?" Maya looked around the showroom, her eyes calm but firm. She saw the same polished car she had admired yesterday, but now they didn't shine as brightly. The luxury wasn't tempting anymore. It was tainted by the memory of how she had been treated. She turned back to her father. "I don't want a car from here, Daddy," she said softly but clearly. "Not from them." Robert smiled at her, a proud father's smile. He nodded, then turned back to the manager. "You hear that? My daughter doesn't want anything from you, and I don't blame her." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You see, I could buy every single car in this showroom without thinking twice. I could buy the entire dealership, but I won't spend a single dollar in a place that doesn't respect people for who they are." The audience of customers murmured in agreement. Some even nodded, their own respect for Robert growing by the second. The manager's face turned pale. His empire of arrogance was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Robert then added, "Respect isn't something you fake. when you see wealth. Respect is something you show to every person who walks through those doors, whether they arrive in a suit or in sneakers, in a Rolls-Royce or on foot. Remember that. With that, he gently placed a hand on Maya's shoulder, guiding her toward the exit. The chauffeur was already waiting outside, the Phantom gleaming like a jewel in the sunlight. But before leaving, Robert turned back one final time. His voice was low, but it cut through the air like a blade. Consider this a lesson. The world doesn't revolve around who you think belongs. Sometimes, the person you dismiss is the very person you should respect most. And with that, father and daughter walked out, leaving behind a dealership in stunned silence. The automatic doors closed behind them, but the echoes of Robert's words lingered in the air. For Maya, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming her dignity. Yesterday, she had been thrown out in shame. Today, she walked out in triumph, her head high, her father by her side, and her voice finally heard. The sun rose slowly over the city, painting the skyline gold. But for Maya, this wasn't just another morning. She woke with her heart pounding, her mind racing with what her father had promised the night before. She got dressed carefully, choosing a simple but elegant outfit. Not flashy, not expensive-looking, just clean, neat, and graceful. She wanted to feel confident, but still be herself. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a girl who wasn't the same as yesterday. Yesterday, she had been humiliated. Today, she was ready to stand tall. Downstairs, Robert Williams was already waiting. He was dressed sharply, not in the casual clothes he usually wore home, but in a tailored black suit. It wasn't meant to show off. It was meant to send a message. Today wasn't about blending in. Today was about being seen. "Ready?" he asked, his deep voice calm but steady. Maya nodded, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. They stepped outside, and there it was, gleaming like a jewel under the morning sun, a jet-black Rolls-Royce Phantom, polished to perfection, its chrome grille shining like a crown. The car wasn't just transportation. It was a statement, the kind of statement that turned heads, silenced crowds, and reminded everyone of who truly held power. The chauffeur stood by the door, bowing respectfully as Robert and Maya approached. He opened the rear door with practiced precision. Maya hesitated for a moment, staring at the luxurious interior, the cream leather seats, the wood trim, the starlight ceiling that twinkled softly even in daylight. She had ridden in the Phantom before, of course, but today it felt different. Today, it wasn't just a ride. It was an entrance. Robert placed a reassuring hand on her back. "Go on, sweetheart," he said. "This is your day." She stepped inside, and the door closed with a soft, solid thud, the unmistakable sound of craftsmanship and power. Robert followed, sitting beside her, his presence grounding her nervous energy. The engine purred to life, deep and commanding, like a lion waking from its sleep. As the car glided out of the driveway and onto the road, Maya felt her anxiety mixed with excitement. She imagined the looks on the faces at the dealership. She pictured the manager's sneer melting into shock. She almost smiled just thinking about it. But underneath the excitement was something deeper, dignity. This wasn't about revenge. It was about standing tall, about proving that worth isn't judged by appearances. Meanwhile, across the city, the dealership buzzed with its usual morning routine. Salesmen polished the cars, adjusting their ties and rehearsing their pitches. The manager strutted around the floor, barking orders like a general before battle. He had already forgotten about Maya. To him, she had been nothing more than a nuisance, another time-waster who didn't belong. He had no idea that the girl he'd humiliated was on her way back, and this time she wouldn't be alone. Customers began to trickle in. A wealthy couple examined a sleek silver Bentley. A businessman in an expensive watch negotiated the price of a luxury SUV. The manager smiled smugly, already calculating his commission for the day. Then it happened. A low, powerful rumble echoed outside the glass walls of the showroom. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even the salesman froze. The sound was unmistakable. The deep, commanding growl of a Rolls-Royce Phantom engine. The car glided into view like royalty arriving at a palace. Black as midnight, polished perfection. Its very presence seemed to silence the world around it. It rolled to a stop directly in front of the dealership, the sunlight bouncing off its flawless surface. Inside, whispers erupted. Is that a phantom? It has to be. Who's inside? Every eye in the showroom was glued to the entrance. Even the manager's jaw dropped slightly, though he quickly composed himself, straightening his tie and smoothing his jacket. He had seen wealthy clients before, but this was something different. Rolls-Royce clients weren't just rich. They were powerful, important, untouchable. The chauffeur stepped out first, his uniform crisp, his movements sharp. He walked around the car and opened the rear door with reverence. Out stepped Maya. For a moment, the room didn't react. It was as if the world itself froze, unable to process what it was seeing. The same girl who'd been thrown out yesterday now emerged from the back of a car worth more than most people's houses. Her head was high, her shoulders back. She wasn't timid or shy. She walked with quiet confidence, the kind that didn't need to be loud to be powerful. Gasps filled the showroom. Wait, is that the same girl from yesterday? Someone whispered. No way. She's with that Rolls-Royce. What's going on? And then the second door opened. Robert Williams stepped out. The moment his polished shoes touched the ground, the energy in the dealership shifted. People recognized him instantly. Whispers turned into a buzz. That's Robert Williams. The billionaire investor? Oh my God, it's him. Phones came out. Pictures were taken. The air was thick with shock and awe. The manager's face went pale. His confident smile evaporated. Suddenly, his polished suit felt cheap, his arrogance hollow. He realized, in that exact moment, that the girl he had thrown out yesterday wasn't just anyone. She was the daughter of the man who could buy the entire dealership with a swipe of a pen. Maya turned and looked at him. She didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She just stood there, calm and proud, her father beside her. And in that silence, the weight of the moment crashed down on everyone present. The girl they had dismissed, the girl they had humiliated, the girl they had told, "You don't belong here." She was back. And this time, the dealership would never forget her. Dinner at the Williams household was usually warm and filled with chatter. Their dining room, though spacious and elegant, wasn't the kind of flashy banquet hall you'd expect from a billionaire. The walls were lined with bookshelves. The chandelier was simple, and the long oak table was always set with care. For Robert Williams, wealth wasn't measured in silver or gold. It was measured in moments spent with his daughter. But that evening, the air felt different. Maya sat slumped in her chair, poking at her food with her fork. Normally, she would be talking about school, laughing about her sketches of cars, or asking her father questions about engines and designs. But tonight, she was silent. Her shoulders drooped, her eyes seemed far away, and her lips pressed into a thin line. Robert noticed immediately. He always noticed. "Maya," he said gently, putting down his knife and fork. "What's troubling you?" At first, Maya shook her head. "Nothing, Dad. I'm fine." But Robert's eyes, sharp, wise, and experienced, could read her like an open book. He had seen that same expression before in boardrooms, when nervous executives tried to hide bad news. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Sweetheart, you know you can tell me anything," he said softly. "What happened today?" The words caught in her throat. For a moment, she wanted to stay silent. She didn't want to burden him with her humiliation. But the memory of the dealership manager's sneer replayed in her mind, louder than ever. "You don't belong here." Her chest tightened, and tears welled in her eyes. She took a deep breath. And then, slowly, the story spilled out. She told him about walking into the dealership, about the shiny sports cars that had caught her eye, and about the way she had admired them from a distance. Her voice trembled as she described how the salesman looked at her like she was dirt, how the customers whispered and chuckled, and how the manager himself had ordered her out. By the time she reached the part where she repeated the man's words, "Get out. You don't belong here," her voice cracked completely. Tears slid down her cheeks. Robert listened in silence. His jaw tightened, and his hands curled into fists under the table. His daughter's pain was his pain, but he didn't interrupt. He let her speak until every word was out, until the silence between them was filled only by her quiet sobs. When she was done, she buried her face in her hands. "I felt so small, Dad," she whispered. "Like I wasn't good enough. Like I didn't matter." Robert pushed back his chair and walked around the table. He crouched beside her and gently lifted her chin, forcing her to look into his eyes. "You matter more than anything in this world, Maya," he said firmly. "And don't you ever let anyone tell you otherwise." She sniffled, her lower lip trembling. "But he made me feel like I didn't belong." Robert's eyes burned with fire. That man made a mistake. A mistake he will never forget. Maya blinked. "What do you mean?" Robert stood, his towering figure suddenly commanding the room. His voice, calm yet powerful, carried the authority of a man who had built empires. "Listen to me, Maya. People like that manage your measure worth by what they see on the outside. They judge you by your clothes, your age, the color of your skin. But that's because they are blind to real value. They think money is everything, but money without respect is nothing." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Tomorrow, we will remind them of that. Tomorrow, they will learn who you are, not because of me, but because of you. You walked in there with a pure heart, with love for something you dream about. And instead of encouraging you, they tried to crush you. That is unforgivable." Maya's tears slowed as she listened. She wasn't used to seeing her father this way. Usually, he was calm, patient, almost gentle in everything he did. But tonight, she saw another side of him, the side that had built companies, commanded boardrooms, and made billionaires listen, a side that was powerful and unshakable. "Tomorrow?" she asked softly. Robert nodded. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Tomorrow, you and I are going back to that dealership." Maya's eyes widened. "Back? But why?" "Because sometimes," Robert said, "people need to be reminded not to judge a book by its cover. And sometimes the best way to teach that lesson is to turn their arrogance into shame." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're not going there to be angry. We're going there to stand tall. We're going to show them that dignity is worth more than any car in that showroom." Maya swallowed, her heart pounding. "And how will we do that?" Robert's smile deepened. "Let's just say, tomorrow morning, they'll hear the sound of a Rolls-Royce engine outside their doors. And when they see who steps out, they'll realize the biggest mistake of their lives." For the first time that day, Maya's lips curled into a small smile. Her father's confidence was contagious. She didn't fully understand what he had planned, but she trusted him. She always did. Robert stood tall again, his eyes filled with resolve. Inside, he wasn't just thinking about the dealership. He was thinking about every time he had seen people like that manager, arrogant, shallow, blind to real worth. He had built his empire by refusing to be like them, and now one of them had dared to wound his daughter. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about teaching a lesson that would echo not just through the dealership, but through everyone who witnessed it. That night, as Maya went to bed, she felt a strange mix of nervousness and excitement. Her humiliation still lingered, but now it was wrapped in something stronger, hope. She couldn't stop picturing the look on that manager's face when he realized who she really was. Downstairs, Robert made a phone call. His voice was calm but firm. "Bring the Phantom around in the morning, sharp at 10. He ended the call and leaned back in his chair. His mind was set. His plan was ready. Tomorrow, the world would see that Maya Williams didn't just belong in that dealership. She belonged everywhere her dreams could take her. And tomorrow, the arrogant man who had humiliated her would stand speechless in the shadow of a Rolls-Royce. On the outside, Maya looked like any ordinary schoolgirl. She wore the same navy blue uniform every day, carried the same worn-out backpack, and rode the same old bus as the rest of her classmates. Her sneakers had scuffed soles, her notebooks were covered in doodles, and her hair was often tied back in a simple braid. Nobody at school or anywhere else would have guessed the truth, because hidden behind that simplicity was a life that most people could only dream of. Maya was the daughter of Robert Williams, one of the wealthiest men in the country. His net worth was whispered about in business magazines. His name was etched into skyscrapers, and his investments touched nearly every industry: technology, real estate, banking, even luxury cars. He wasn't just rich. He was untouchably rich. But unlike most billionaires, Robert didn't flaunt his fortune. He didn't walk around in designer suits every day, dripping in gold. He didn't throw lavish parties just to show off. Instead, he chose to live humbly. Why? Because Robert knew the dangers of wealth. He hadn't been born rich. He grew up in a small neighborhood where money was always tight. His parents worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. He knew what it was like to struggle, to be ignored, to be looked down upon. And he never forgot those lessons, even after success came knocking. So when he had Maya, his only daughter, he made a promise to himself. She will never grow up spoiled. She will know respect before riches, humility before luxury. And he kept that promise. Maya didn't go to school in a limo, even though she could have. She didn't wear $1,000 shoes, even though her father's credit cards had no limits. She didn't walk around telling people her last name, even though it could open every door in the city. To the world, she was just Maya, and she liked it that way. But the world can be cruel to those who don't fit its narrow boxes. At school, some kids tease her for not having the newest phone or designer clothes. "Why do you dress so plain?" they'd ask. She would just shrug and smile, never revealing the truth. If only they knew she could buy every phone in the store and not even blink. At shops, clerks sometimes ignored her, assuming she couldn't afford much. At restaurants, waiters would seat her in the corner, treating her as if she wasn't important. None of it bothered her much, until the day at the dealership. That humiliation cut deeper than all the others combined. Because cars weren't just her interest, they were her passion. They represented freedom, dreams, and possibility. And to be told she didn't belong in a place full of them, it was like someone had locked the gates to her dream and thrown away the key. But here's what the manager didn't know, what no one knew. Behind Maya's tears and ordinary clothes stood a father who was not just powerful, but fiercely protective. A father who loved his daughter more than any dollar in his bank account. Robert Williams wasn't just a billionaire. He was a man who believed in justice. He was a man who despised arrogance, who had built his empire not by stepping on people, but by lifting them up. He was the kind of man who fired employees if they treated others unfairly, no matter how skilled they were. And when his daughter was insulted, humiliated, and pushed aside, he wasn't going to let it slide. That night, when Maya returned home, Robert noticed something was wrong. Dinner at their modest but elegant home was usually filled with laughter. Maya would talk about her day, her friends, her sketches of cars. But that night, she was quiet. Her food went untouched. Robert set down his fork and studied her. His eyes, sharp yet gentle, saw what words couldn't hide. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" he asked softly. Maya hesitated. She didn't want to complain. She didn't want to sound weak. But the memory of the manager's voice replayed in her head, louder and louder, until she couldn't hold it in any more. She told him everything. She told him about the car she had admired, about the excitement bubbling in her chest as she stepped into the dealership. She told him about the cold glares, the whispers, the mocking stares. And then, finally, she told him about the manager's words. "Get out. You don't belong here." Her voice broke as she said it, and a tear slid down her cheek. Robert listened in silence. His hands slowly tightened into fists under the table, though his face remained calm. When she finished, he reached across and held her hand. His eyes locked onto hers, steady and full of fire. "Maya," he said, his voice low but powerful, "never let anyone tell you where you do or don't belong. Never." She sniffled and looked down. "But, Dad, he made me feel so small." Robert shook his head firmly. "You are not small. You are not ordinary. You are my daughter. And tomorrow will remind them of that." Maya blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" Robert leaned back in his chair, a rare smile curling on his lips. "You'll see. Sometimes people need to be taught a lesson, not with anger, but with truth. And tomorrow, that lesson will arrive in the form of a Rolls-Royce." Maya's eyes widened. She didn't fully understand what he meant, but something inside her sparked again. A flicker of hope, a flicker of strength. Because if there was one thing she knew about her father, it was this. When Robert Williams made a promise, the world listened. The dealership had no idea what storm was about to walk through its doors the next morning. Maya walked home with slow steps, her backpack pressing against her shoulders like it carried not just books, but the weight of her shattered pride. The words of the dealership manager echoed endlessly in her mind. You don't belong here. But here's the truth. Maya's heart belonged there more than anyone else's. Cars weren't just her hobby. They were her passion, her escape, her dream. From the time she was a little girl, she had been fascinated with them. While other kids played with dolls or video games, Maya would line up her toy cars in perfect rows, pretending she was running her own car show. She would memorize the models, colors, and even the sound of engines. She didn't just play, she studied. Her father, Robert, noticed this early on. She would sit on the porch with him when she was just 8, pointing at every car that passed by. That's a BMW 7 Series, she'd shout excitedly, or that's a Mercedes G-Wagon. Her accuracy amazed even her father, though he often laughed and said, You're going to put car dealers out of business one day, Maya. But Robert never spoiled her with luxury. Even though he could buy her a car collection bigger than most dealerships, he didn't. He believed in humility. He believed Maya should earn things with her passion, not just be handed them. That was why she looked so ordinary in her school uniform, carrying a cheap backpack instead of wearing designer clothes. Nobody would guess she was the daughter of a billionaire, and Robert wanted it that way. To Maya, that never mattered. She didn't need expensive things to fuel her dream. She just needed the sight of cars, the hum of an engine, the shine of metal under sunlight. Her notebooks at school were filled not with doodles of hearts and stars, but with sketches of cars. She could spend hours on the internet watching documentaries about car design and racing legends. So, when she walked past the dealership that afternoon, her heart had pulled her inside. The glass door seemed to whisper, Come and see. She wanted to stand closer, to smell the leather interiors, to feel the cool paint under her fingers. She knew she couldn't buy anything, not yet, but that wasn't the point. The point was to dream bigger than her reality. But dreams, she learned, could be fragile. The humiliation she suffered inside crushed her spirit. All she wanted was to admire beauty, yet she was treated like trash. For the first time in her life, she questioned her own worth. Maybe they're right, she whispered to herself as she walked. Maybe I don't belong in those places. Her throat tightened and her vision blurred with tears. But even as the pain grew, something inside her refused to die, because her dream wasn't built on money or status. It was built on love. She remembered the nights when she'd stay up late on her laptop, headphones on, watching videos of car factories. She loved the sound of machines piecing together something extraordinary. She loved hearing engineers talk about horsepower and torque like they were poetry. She loved how cars weren't just vehicles. They were symbols of human creativity. Whenever she saw a luxury car speed past her on the street, she didn't feel envy. She felt hope. Hope that one day she could sit behind the wheel of something she had worked for. Her friends at school didn't always understand. They teased her sometimes. Why do you care so much about cars, Maya? You don't even own one. She'd just smile and say, because dreams don't need ownership. Dreams just need belief. Still, that didn't erase the sting of what had happened. At home, she laid on her bed, staring at the posters above her head. Lamborghinis, Porsches, Bugattis. They seemed to stare back at her, like silent witnesses to her shame. She reached up and traced her finger along the outline of a Ferrari. One day, she whispered, you'll be mine, not because I'm rich, not because anyone gave you to me, but because I never gave up on you. Maya closed her eyes, and memories of her childhood filled her mind. She remembered riding in the back seat of her father's car, her face pressed against the window, counting every luxury car they passed. She remembered the time her father let her sit in the driver's seat of his old Bentley, even though her feet couldn't reach the pedals. She remembered how alive she felt whenever she heard the growl of an engine. Cars weren't just machines to Maya. They were promises of freedom, speed, and a life bigger than the one she knew. That's why the humiliation at the dealership hurt so deeply. The manager hadn't just insulted her. He had stepped on her dream, crushing it under his polished shoes. But what he didn't know, what no one in that showroom knew, was that Maya wasn't just a girl dreaming from the outside. She was already connected to that world in ways they couldn't imagine, because behind her simple clothes and school uniform was a life no one could guess. Her father wasn't just Robert, her dad. He was Robert Williams, the billionaire investor, the man whose name carried weight in every boardroom, the same man who could buy the entire dealership with a single phone call. Maya never flaunted that. She never bragged. She never walked into a place saying, "Do you know who my father is?" That wasn't who she was. But now, sitting in her room, replaying the cruel words, she realized something. Silence had its limits. This time, it wasn't just about her. It was about every kid who ever walked into a place with big dreams and got told, "You don't belong." It was about proving that worth isn't judged by clothes or age or the color of your skin. She wiped her tears, sat up straight, and looked again at her posters. Her fire was returning. She didn't know how, but she knew one thing for sure. The next time she stepped into that dealership, it wouldn't be as a girl they mocked. It would be as someone who carried both her dream and her dignity. And little did she know that next time was coming sooner than anyone expected, because her father, calm, wise, and fiercely protective, was about to find out what happened to his little girl. And when he did, the entire dealership would never forget the name Maya Williams.